Hello, and welcome to Wired for Wellbeing, a podcast devoted to viewing our lives through a nervous system perspective to better understand what's actually going on and how to shift it. Because we are inherently wired for well-being. We all hold the keys to connection, happiness, and ease. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and I've been a clinical psychologist who specialized in the treatment of trauma, dissociation, and chronic illness and chronic pain for over 40 years. In this podcast, we listen to real questions and challenges from people just like you, and we offer guidance, perspective, and a way through. I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, everyone. Jeffrey, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're investigating how our nervous system holds both our history and our potential for healing. We're asking, how do we accept what is, particularly if you're struggling with chronic illness, while still working toward real change? And what role does anger play? Can it be a destructive force or a doorway to deeper healing? Steve, what calls do you have for us this week?
The first question I want to take us to is from an anonymous caller. And I guess just to name it, if anybody out there is nervous about leaving their name, that's totally fine. We absolutely will take anonymous phone calls and emails in. And if you do want to leave your name, just put it in your voicemail and we'll be happy to share it. So, anonymous caller, this person is trying to balance their desire for change and accepting what is. And I think this is a real common thing, Jeffrey. I think this is going to come up a lot of people wanting the change to happen faster or things to look a little bit different than they really are. Let's take a listen to this first question and then give you some space to respond.
Great.
My question is, how do we both accept what is in the present moment fully and work for beneficial change? I'm thinking of this on a personal level. I have a long-term chronic illness, which is largely a consequence of childhood trauma. I've been working on multiple levels to change this, and there's been positive change, more energy and less pain. But I also realize that I'm never going to have the nervous system of someone who was not abused or traumatized as a child. But there's a line between accepting and working and living with what is and giving up on real change. So I guess that's the question. How do we both accept what is in the present and work for beneficial change?
Yeah, you're right, Steve. This is a question that I think we're going to unpack in different ways from different folks. But this is a very powerful and important question. You know, our caller struggles, as many of our listeners do, with chronic illness or chronic pain. And that has its own debilitating effects on our quality of life, on our energy. And from a nervous system perspective, any chronic illness pushes us more towards that low energy or de-energized state of shutdown and collapse. So if we're struggling with a chronic illness, we feel largely depleted, shut down, isolated, sometimes depressed. But and this is the body's response to illness, chronic or acute, is to go into this low energy shutdown state to allow the body a chance to heal. Instead of using all of this energy for activity and busyness, we slow down our body's activity and we allow healing to occur without being depleted. But as we enter that state, it also has a direct impact on our mood. Our mood tends to go south. We tend to get more critical, more discouraged, feel more hopeless or powerless, feel more stuck, feel disappointed in ourselves and in our life, may feel shame too about like, why aren't I healthier? Why aren't I getting over this better? Other people aren't as sick as I am, and so forth. So the fact, if anyone dealing with a chronic illness or chronic pain, in and of itself, it creates a struggle for our nervous system. that its tendency to go into this low energy mode to heal is what can also send us into a mood spiral. And so that's difficult and challenging. But our caller here is actually even pointing towards an issue that includes that and goes a little bit further, which is that this caller is aware that at one level, we need to work at accepting what is. And that doesn't mean resignation or hopelessness. It's just, it's not really a great use of our energy to fight against what is. For example, if I have cancer, it's not a great use of my energy to fight the idea that I have cancer. I refuse to accept that I have cancer. I'm not having cancer. This can't be true. Well, I mean, it certainly is understandable that someone would feel that way. But if we engage in that behavior, we're actually not going to be engaging in behavior that might help us heal or overcome the cancer. We're just going to instead get more angry, upset, resentful, resistant. And all of these are normal human reactions, but they take a toll on us. They further deplete our ability to feel well. So one situation I experience often with people who have chronic pain or chronic illness is that um, they go and do some activity, like they walk into town to get something, and then they find that they're exhausted. And then they're depressed that they got exhausted from doing that. And then they get judgmental and shaming because what's wrong with me? I mean, anybody can walk into town. I'm just walking into town and I'm exhausted and have to spend 3 hours in bed when I get home. And so that anger at ourselves for the symptoms actually increases the toll that the illness is placing on our nervous system and body, because now we're joining the fight. We're getting angry with ourselves and angry at the illness. So our caller is aware that to fight what is actually only maintains or deepens her current level of suffering. But is there a difference between accepting what is and also navigating for beneficial change? And this is, I think, a really great and astute way of posing those two, what can seem to be conflicts. It is possible for us to truly accept what is with our illness or our state of finances, or whether we're partnered or unpartnered, or with child or without child, whatever it is. We can move towards allowing ourselves to be with the situation as it is, because it is. And at the same time, from a more regulated place, we can get curious about what action can I do that moves towards beneficial change. If the beneficial change is about helping our nervous system and body handle our illness better, we can get curious about what kinds of restorative activities might I be able to engage in to help me heal, to help me move towards the level of functioning that I'd like. But we have to do this with an element of compassion. If we just issue edicts from our brain, well, I'm running a 5K in 2 months, so no matter what, I'm getting in shape for it. That's a decision you're making with your brain. A lot of us do that. But you may be working against the nervous system in the body, that the body may not really be up for doing what the brain thinks it should. And so you're going to find that you're going to get injuries, or you won't have much motivation or discipline to continue the practice or the training. These are just ways that our nervous system talks back to us and begins to say, hey, don't push so hard. Now, if we can actually pause and listen to what our nervous system is trying to tell us, we become a partner in the process. And we can work with our nervous system to both feel grounded and present now, to not feel such pain about what is, to be with it as it is, and at the same time be open to and be willing to devote energy and some effort towards improving the situation. But there's an inner shift that's really, really important. And that inner shift is that I'm working at accepting my limitations right now, whether it's pain or exhaustion or my tendency to get angry, whatever it is. But usually, when we go on a self improvement binge to make things better, we sort of go in this I hate this me. I need to quickly get to a better me, a place where I'm healthier or more likable or have more control over my feelings or getting paid what I think I should. And we can be so desperate for the future to arrive, right? We can actually make ourselves quite activated and quite distressed in the process of getting there. So, as we're working for our health or thinking that we are by striving for some future healthy day, we're actually subjecting our nervous system to incredible pressure and stress to try to get there. And also with this message that I'm just not good enough now. I'll be good enough at some future date, but right now I suck. So, that whole getting caught up in judging ourselves and feeling that we're not good enough is part of what can maintain this struggle about wanting to fight what is. But if we can allow ourselves to make the first important step of slowing down and noticing that we have kind of two different voices here. One voice is the voice of the nervous system or the immune system or your illness saying, I need rest. I can't overstress. And another voice in you, a healthy voice that also says, I'd like to have more ability. I'd like to feel healthier a bit. I'd like to feel like I have more stamina. And you can work for those things without causing you such stress about hating what is, resisting what is. So we can move towards a position of less resistance of what is, allowing what is, and still leaning toward positive change, growth. And whether that's personal, health wise, development wise, or whether it's societal, we can accept things as they are and work for beneficial growth without creating a struggle between the two, as long as we allow each voice to be heard with a sense of compassion versus judgment. How'd that land for you, Steve?
It brought up a lot for me, and the realizations that I'm having are just that inner shift just seems so insurmountable sometimes. And I think we can intellectualize it and we can talk about surrender and letting go. And I think we can have that knowledge on one side. But when it really comes to it, it's hard. It's hard to make that shift. I sometimes think about like from our brain to our heart, right? Shifting from that the things we think we need to do to what we really need to do. You talked about it in answering this question about even letting the person, allowing the person to give themselves permission to rest when their brain is saying you should be more productive, you should do this. And yeah, it just really resonates with me how difficult that is. What's going on in our nervous system? Why is that shift so difficult? And actually, is it even important for us to know why it's difficult? Is that an important part of the
Well,
process?
I do think so. I think that it's helpful to understand that our nervous system is always working for our safety and, as much as it can conceive of this, our benefit. But within evolutionary survival terms, again, as I've said before, the nervous system is not concerned with our pleasure or our happiness. It's only concerned with our safety and our biological benefit of certain situations to get our genes to the next generation. So, as we've grown over these thousands of years to have a thinking brain and what it does in our head, when there is something wrong, a sense of agency arises for most of us, and we begin to try to figure out what have we done to create or contribute to this situation. Now, that's a normal thinking process that folks get into. It just is normal. Kids will do this, without parents saying anything. If there's a divorce, kids will often begin to think and wonder without any prompting about whether they're fighting or they're not cleaning their room somehow created the rift that made their parents divorce. We just do this as humans. We look for understanding conflict and problems, and often we put ourselves in the mix as a source of it. Now, this tendency in all humans gets intensified, magnified, amplified if you've had trauma. If you've had trauma at some point in your life, your shame circuits are very, very much turned on and hypersensitive. And so what'll happen is that anything that you notice or feels different about you, between you and someone else, you will almost automatically envision as some kind of fault or lack or deficit in you. You'll just automatically fall. So if I have an illness, I'm automatically less than. And my whole nervous system is gained towards trying to improve that. So it's all circling around, I'm the source. I got to find the solution because I got to get better. I made this bed that I'm lying in and I want to unmake it and get up and be well. And so this normal way that human nervous systems have to attack a problem as we move into fight or flight and we get kind of aggressive behind it or pushy, and that energy can be very helpful in us persevering. But that energy also has the tendency to think that only change and transformation can occur by force, by effort, by will. And so I just have to try harder. I have to be more shaming, more disciplined, less sensitive, less caring about what I feel or what other people feel, and just muscle on through no matter what. And while our brains are giving us this information frequently, our nervous systems just can't work like that. So our brains, it takes a while for our brains to begin to understand that the nervous system, to work with the nervous system, requires a different way of relating to the nervous system, not by trying to, use a whip and whip it into shape, but as a way of befriending an estranged part of you, this automatic wiring that just helps keep you alive and also impacts moods and behaviors. We can look under the hood, see this is happening, and then we can realize we have another option. Instead of force, I can actually move more towards grounding and being present with something. And the moment that I do that, the moment that I do this internal shift of, instead of the constant fighting and pushing against something, to just kind of sit and be with a feeling, just to take it in and see how that's landing in me, that's a very, very empowering movement, but it's a counterintuitive one, right? From so many sources, we're taught that the only way a problem gets solved is active pushing and efforting. And sometimes this quality of settling into a place of not being at war with ourselves is actually a releasing of some of that efforting and allowing us to contact a sense of regulation here and now, in spite of whatever problems with the world or our body we see. We're able to still find a level and place of safety and grounding and presence that then can inform how we react to our struggles or to struggles in the world. But I think the blind spot is that we're so prone to action that it doesn't occur to us that something of softer action can be even more powerful. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And I think this is a good segue into our next question, Jeffrey, because we're talking about the role of chronic pain in accepting what is and experiencing trauma. And our next question talks about anger, how to navigate this when you're really angry, how to place the anger in the right place, or use the energy of anger. Do we not use the energy? Anyway, I'm gonna let the caller share the question, but
Okay,
let's
great.
jump into that.
Hi, I'd like to hear about the role of anger in the healing process. It seems in my personal experience, I've had to burn through the anger to work on healing with certain individuals, and there must be a better way. Some tools and some guidance and observations would be very helpful. Thank you.
This is a great question, Steve. Thank you for this. And I appreciate our caller sharing this too. So, first of all, let's just take a slight step back. The role of any emotions in general, uh, one of the more helpful ways to look at emotions is that they're information, they're messages. They're talking about whether or not you feel safe, understood, respected, comfortable, because any of those things, if you feel disrespected, uncomfortable, not included, not wanted, all those things will make us feel unsafe. So it's helpful to realize that our anger, our sadness, our jealousy, our shame, they're all messages. They may not be messages about truth as it is, objective truth, but they are messages about how we're feeling, how our nervous system is feeling and perceiving the world in that moment. So there's no bad emotions, there's no bad states. Every single emotional state we get to gives us information about the situation that we're in. Now, sometimes it also gives us information about our past mixed in with the present. That's kind of a whole nother hallway we can go down at some point in time. But for right now, let's start with anger, as in this example, is a message. And what this caller is talking about, though, is once she becomes aware of the anger and it gets started, it's hard to stop. And she usually has to really just take the time and let the anger burn itself out, which is sometimes very long. For some angers, it can feel almost interminable, like you never reach the end of the anger. Years ago when I did therapy with adolescents and we were looking at ways to help discharge anger, it was recommended that you could let an angry, adolescent rip up a phone book. So I had a closet of phone books. I had this one 11-year-old kid who came in with anger, and one day he went through like 9 or 10 phone books. Another session, he went through like another 10 or 12 phone books. I mean, ripping them up. My office was piled with 3 feet high of ripped paper from phone books, and he wasn't slowing down. And it was time around then that I began to realize, as did other clinicians, it was proven out a few years later in some research, that stuff that gets us to tap into anger doesn't necessarily exhaust our anger, because our nervous system can keep creating anger. If I keep thinking about an incident that really hurt me or disappointed me, and I had anger because of that, every time I think about that and feel into that situation again, it's going to reignite the anger. So anger is a message. And like with all emotions, once an emotional state gets started in us, a defensive state, fight, flight, or shutdown, the tendency of the nervous system is to keep them going, right? To not just start you in a defensive state and then just stop that. The idea is, if the nervous system is picking up that things are dangerous and they want you to move into a defensive state to protect yourself, the nervous system wants you to stay there until it's clear that the danger is gone. But if we keep going back to the story and poking at the ashes of the story and getting it to flame up again and again and again, we'll have all this anger, and we'll all continue to feel unsafe with that amount of anger. We'll feel like something's up. I'm still irritated, not feeling accepted, feel like I have to fight for myself. So in this case, caller, I would recommend, number one, having some compassion and recognition for the anger that you feel. There's a real reason that you feel that anger. Because, and I've said this before, anger comes from primarily 3 sources. It comes from hurt, disappointment, or something feeling unfair or unjust. Those things will usually very quickly transform into irritation, anger, rage. So most likely, one of those 3 things has touched your life, possibly in the past and now, that these people are showing, and it just taps into this storehouse of anger that you have. So once you realize you're angry, you can then get curious about, why are you continuing to hold it and to have it? I'm not putting the blame on you. I'm just saying, sometimes, we get angry, someone cuts us off and we say a few things under our breath and maybe gesture, and then a mile or 2 down the road, it's gone. We're thinking about something else. But some angers come in and they ignite a spark and it keeps burning, usually because it's touching us on a deeper psychological level about a deeper wound, a deeper pain. So getting curious about what's causing and maintaining the anger to stay front and center, may give you a little bit more access to what's underneath this, what's happening in these interactions that's causing you to be so angry. And then again, giving yourself compassion, self-compassion for getting so angry. And this is going to be a stretch. Offering compassion towards your friends or individuals because they're so annoying. Most people who are annoying are not doing it to be abusive or deliberately mean or as something personal against you. In my experience, most people are annoying because their nervous system is operating on a different rhythm or beat than ours, and we feel put upon or besieged or drained or exhausted or irritated because our nervous system is reacting to their nervous system. So understanding how our nervous system is reacting to other nervous systems and other nervous systems then react to ours, that's part of this dance to begin to understand. And that if I do want a kind of healing connection with some folks, I'm going to be interested in seeing if I can both be aware of my anger and work with it. And sometimes that might mean saying something to one of these friends like, what you said hurt me, or what you did disappointed me, or what happened felt unfair and unjust. And I have some pretty strong feelings about that. By the way, it's much easier to talk to someone else about your feelings of hurt, disappointment, or something being unfair than immediately delineating that you're angry. Because the moment you say you're angry to someone, they will usually get defensive and stop hearing what you're trying to say after that. So it makes us feel even more frustrated. So the tools basically are finding your way back to regulation. Hand on heart can be helpful. Hand on heart and face, the face-heart connection is very helpful for having a moment of pause, connecting back to a sense of more compassion towards ourselves. It's just really allowing yourself to feel the contact of these two hands and allowing yourself to just make space for the anger that's here. You don't have to ride it all the ways through, but you can be with it in a kind way, a caring way, with the hurt that's fueling this anger, with the disappointment that's fueling this anger. And you'll find that when you get into a compassionate connection with the source of the anger begins to change and soften. So I hope that's helpful and maybe gives you some ideas about how to move with this frustrating situation. Steve, what do you think?
So I'm hearing it might not be, well, clearly it's not about burning through the anger. We've talked about that, or exhausting the anger. It sounds like it's like transmuting or transforming the anger.
Exactly. And the alchemy here is in changing our relationship, we change everything. In changing the relationship with our nervous system, we move from blaming ourselves from being so effed up to seeing, oh, this is my nervous system doing this, just like it does this for every human, right? And we begin to see it less through a lens of fault and failing and more as this is the natural process. It's a paradigm shift. And if we begin to look at our nervous system as a potential partner, we don't have to hate or shame ourselves into change because that doesn't work. But we can have a kind desire to help ourselves move and grow along the path so that we feel more empowered. We're more clear about where we are. We have options.
The other thing that's occurring to me is just like how fast emotions are. And I hear you trying to offer suggestions and tools to, what is it, like maybe like allow our brain to catch up to the emotion. And sometimes when that person cuts you off, it's cursing and frustration, and then you can cool down. But like we just don't have access to that rational thought right away. And I don't know, for me, like that can bring up a lot of frustration or shame, or like, I wish I was better at this, or I wish I was an enlightened enough being where I could, with equanimity, face all, but it's just not, I'm not there. And probably a lot of other people aren't
No.
there.
And the fact is, again, the shame and the blame, which I have felt too, comes so much from this idea that we should have better control over ourselves. But the truth is, we can't control our nervous system. We can learn how to nudge it and guide it and work with it. But initially, it's not going to be that people just don't get angry. They'll find they get angry, but they don't get as angry. They may not have the same kind of potentially destructive outburst. They may know what they feel like saying, but they may refrain from saying it just because they know it's going to be said out of pain to create pain and division. It's not being said as a way of getting closer, getting back into connection, forging an understanding, or reaffirming our attachment to one another. If I'm speaking out of anger, in those moments, you're my adversary and my words and actions are intended to hurt you. So I pay a lot of attention to my anger, but I try as much as I can to not necessarily speak when I'm in the heat of it, because I'm just going to be adding much more destruction that I'm going to have to clean up or deal with later, right? So it gives us a little bit of a way of working with that. And you're absolutely right. The nervous system is supposed to react much faster than thought. Like by the time it takes you to think, wait, is this dangerous? Should I run? You could be dead. The nervous system is designed to preempt thought. It happens like to generate a thought is, I don't know, about 1/10 of a second, 1/8 of a second. It's a very small amount of time. But the nervous system's reaction is even faster than that. It's a direct reaction. It's like a reflex. And it's designed like that because it's a survival response. So we're feeling like, as a responsible individual, I shouldn't burst out or lose my temper so easily or get so easily frustrated. But by the way, those are only said when we're out of the anger. And notice that these words now are turning the anger against you, which so many of us do. We dive into shame and get angry with ourselves for saying something we regret and that wasn't being fair. And again, a lot of us say that. The interesting thing is, no matter how much we beat ourselves up after an outburst like that, it doesn't change how we do the outburst in the future. A lot of the times it doesn't, because we're speaking when we're in remorse. And we're going to have a whole different story and intention when we're in the middle of fight energy. I'm just going to want to win. I'm not going to want to be reasonable or connect. I'm just going to want to win. So I have to move a little bit out of my anger to realize also and remember what's really important to me. What's really important to me is quality of relationships, feeling connected with people, feeling comfortable, feeling that I can be my true self with other people, that they can be their true self with me. So I think that this is an often struggle too, that our brain is so used to running our lives, thinking about our lives, and believing it's in control. And then it makes up all these reactions when we realize we're not in control. Oh, that's horrible. I'm a horrible person. I'm so unevolved, and I'll never be there. That's a very common place to go, but that's also getting caught by the nervous system's de-energized defenses, the defenses that wrap us in blame, wrap us in a sense of being not enough, or somehow broken or weird or wounded, damaged goods, if you will, and that we kind of live into that as an identity. And that's what's very limiting for people. But that's a good point you bring up about how quick these reactions happen. They are stunning, just stunning how you can go from 0 to 60 in less than a second.
Yeah, and not notice it until an hour later.
Right. Sometimes not even notice it until someone who you were angry with says, do you know how mean you were? Or, like sometimes we don't even know about how off our behavior was until someone reflects it back to us. Because if we're really in a state, we may not have much self-awareness in that moment to be monitoring what's going on.
Let's see about tying these two questions together with and kind of bringing the overarching themes of what we're going into today. And
yeah, so both of these are sort of talking about trying to decide, working with what is, what are some of the best ways to work with what is, and how do I still move towards feeling more healed in my life, more whole in my life, more comfortable in my own skin. And I think, again, that our natural inborn tendencies, especially through our nervous system, is to either fight a problem or run away from the problem, fight or flight. And having cultivating a healing relationship with ourselves, with our nervous system, requires that we find a way to become non-adversarial to ourselves. We can't change by cracking the whip. So in both these cases, and in all of our cases actually, it's really important to be able to first notice, name and notice what's going on. What am I feeling? What's going on here? The second, as part of what's going on here, is to sort of take track of what's going on in your body, but also what's the story that your head is telling you. Pay a little bit of attention to that, or a lot of attention to that. Often our heads will tell us, you're bad, this isn't good, no one else has this problem. Aren't you grown up yet? Haven't you given up doing this? I mean, 1,000 kinds of retorts and comments, which are damaging in their own ways and distracting us, making us feel worse instead of better. So notice what's going on in the body, and notice the quality of the narrative going on in your head. Notice whether it's critical, judgmental, shaming, or whether it's kind, supportive, understanding, talking to someone like you would who's a young, frightened child. You would be kind and soothing. You wouldn't be harsh and judgmental. That's the sound of shame. And then, so that's the first piece. The second piece is then sort of being able to open it up more and begin to inquire about what also wants to emerge here, right? In other words, if I'm angry with someone, I know I don't ultimately want to be angry with them. I want to be in a place where I feel like I don't have a reason to be angry. So I'm going to ideally want the level of connection in the relationship to improve. Or with our first caller, she's trying to find a balance in her relationship with accepting what is, and also having a relationship that's balanced with wanting to work towards beneficial change. And I think this dichotomy going back and forth is what so many of us move in and out. Most of us want to grow. We want to improve our lives. We want to feel better as humans. We want to feel more fulfilled. And those same urges in us to improve can also trigger the condemnation and criticism when we feel we disappoint ourselves, when we don't achieve what we thought we needed to achieve to be okay.
I wrote both of those steps down because I'm going to use them today and well into the future, and make little post-it notes for myself of what's the story my head is telling me, and then what wants to emerge, which feels like, again, like recognizing what's going on up here in my head, and then feeling in my body and my heart what wants to emerge. So I'm going to use those two.
You're
That's
welcome.
helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Because it feels like that's kind of giving us a step back. In other words, what wants to emerge is allowing you to be co-creative with the process, versus usually we're not thinking about what wants to emerge. If we're angry, we're just blurting stuff out. And all of a sudden we've littered the room with curses or insults or negative comments or you always or you never kinds of statements. And we're just digging ourselves deeper into conflict, into fight, because that's only going to create more fight in the other person. Or flight, or shutdown. They're going to react one way or another to our dysregulation. So what I usually want to emerge is some way for me to feel better and the other people to feel better too. And sometimes I won't know what that is when I'm really upset and activated. I need to take a breath, to come back to my body, come back to presence for a moment or two, to then decide what wants to emerge here. And sometimes, like, I want connection, but I'm too hurt, so I need to take a walk or take some more time. Sometimes it emerges that, I'd like to make a repair now. I'd like to say, I'm sorry for my part in this, and I hope we can find some way to connect again. But I won't know what that is ahead of time. I'll only discover it if I actually slow down and give space. And one of the ways to give space is to ask a question. What wants to emerge here now?
Jeffrey, how can people learn more about you? How can they learn more about this work? How can they join you on this journey?
So first of all, I want to thank our two callers for today. These were wonderful and rich questions, and they really were a great diving off point for us to see some of the interesting places the nervous system can impact for us. If you would like to send in a question, feel free to call 866-357-5156. That's 866-357-5156. Or if you cannot reach the 866 exchange from an international number, feel free to send an audio recording. Just you record a link and then put it on your email, and then send the email to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. That's hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And, our takeaways from today, I think, are about the idea that it's not a one and done, that moving into this relationship or an improved relationship with your nervous system is a process. It's something that you will get better and better and better at over time. The most valuable and important thing is to begin the journey. If you can begin the journey to understand and see things through a nervous system perspective, you are really opening up a type of personal liberation for you in terms of not feeling as chained and as driven by your nervous system, and also being able to have more capacity to act from your heart, to respond from your heart versus react from your defensive impulses. And if you'd like a free gift that goes into a little bit more about the nervous system and outlines some techniques and tools you can use, I have a free gift on my website you're welcome to get. It's go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/free gift. That's drjeffreyrutstein.com/free gift. And I hope that'll be helpful for you. And finally, if you enjoyed this and found this helpful, please feel free to share it with any friends who might benefit as well. Thank you so much for spending the time with me. And thank you, Steve, as always, for being a partner in this process.
Jeffrey, thank you for sharing your wisdom and compassion and kindness with all of us. Thank you.
Well, bye for now. Hope to see you next time.